Welcome everybody to another edition of Email Never Sleeps. We're going to talk about the one email in your program that you really shouldn't live without. And, this is a broad topic, everybody, but I think we're going to be able to nail it today. And I've got a special guest on today. His name is Sebastian Kummel, and he is the founder and chief housekeeper of the House of Email, all the way from Sydney, Australia. Sebastian, introduce yourself to everybody. Give us a little bit about your background.
Hi, Andrew. Well, thanks for having me on, first of all.
Yeah.
I actually went back to a few of the older episodes the last couple of days to listen, and there's just so much amazing content and amazing speakers on. So I'm really
Yeah.
glad to be on. Thank you. To myself, yeah, I guess, we have a similar passion for email. My background and sort of the one constant in my professional life was always email marketing. Started working for a large customer engagement platform, which
Mhm.
back then really was, I guess, what you would consider an ESP today. So it was, so you would
Mhm.
remember, I was uploading a list and creating some HTML code, and that was about it. There was no
Yeah.
analytics, there was no marketing automation or any of
Yeah.
that. So spent a few years there, then moved client side to head up CRM departments for retailers and,
Mhm.
and e-com businesses. And now I'm sort of sitting in between the two with the House of Email, which I founded last year. So we're quite new. It's, I'd like to call it an email marketing service and knowledge hub. So there's two sides to the business. One is the content and educational side, where we provide free tips and tricks and do's and don'ts for all
Mhm.
sort of levels of email marketers and digital marketers and everyone around them.
Yeah.
So that's really the fun part of building an email community of people that are really engaged. So I'm really enjoying that. And
Yeah.
then the other side of the business is the consulting service side of business, where we really get our hands dirty and work with businesses to run their email marketing program, to do campaign production, campaign planning, and then a bit of obviously strategy, email marketing strategy, but also
Yeah.
wider CRM customer engagement strategy.
Awesome, man. I've been to your site and there's a lot of helpful tips and tricks, and it's kind of a cool site to peruse. So we'll give all the links to everybody at the end of this podcast. But so let's jump into the topic real quick. We talked before this call at length about email programs that you've been a part of and have headed up and have been a part of, and same here. And we kind of thought about like, hey, if you're in e-commerce or a retailer, what would be that one email that you really would recommend, that you should say to a brand, look, whatever you do, you gotta have this email. It's super, super important. So I'm gonna let you introduce what your thoughts are, and then I'll maybe ask some questions and add some thoughts. But what's your one email that you think they can't live without?
Yeah, sure. I don't think I could land on one specific
Right.
email or program, but I
Yeah.
thought let's maybe chat about post-purchase programs in general.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to unpacking with you, because obviously there's a lot we can talk about. So it's going to be interesting to see how much we can cover. But
Yeah.
um, for me, and again, that's maybe important to mention, my background is B2C, e-com, retail.
Mhm.
It's the clients that we focus also on now. So,
Yeah.
just setting the
Sure.
context for that. But in
Sure.
that area, I think post-purchase, when I work with businesses, is often a bit of the stepchild, is that what you say, of marketing automation? So it's a
Right.
bit,
Yeah.
neglected sometimes almost.
Oh yeah.
We often focus a lot on welcome, on abandoned browser, abandoned cart, emails and programs that have an
Mhm.
immediate conversion goal, immediate short-term revenue, right? So we set it up, we can show, oh, set up this program,
Mhm.
generated $20,000 in revenue
Right.
within 5 days. And then you have post-purchase, where that conversion event just happened, and it's a lot more about building an emotional connection, building brand loyalty long term, building customer lifetime value that is long term rather than a short term conversion event. And
Mhm.
I guess that's the reason it's sometimes a bit
Yeah.
overlooked, and also I think it can be quite complex to think through what that post purchase journey over time for different customers actually
Right.
looks like. But then again, there is also some really simple ones that
Now let's
can.
caveat this because a lot of people might consider post-purchase, right? Like the order confirmation or the ship confirmation or something like shipping delays. You're not talking about that. You're talking about after the product has been delivered, there's a post-purchase, or are you talking about the order ship, that type of confirmation?
It's a
Or
good
both?
point. I think there's those two elements, right? You have the transactional element of post-purchase, which
Mhm.
um, usually works well.
Mhm.
If you're lucky, the email looks somewhat like the rest of the emails and has the same
You're like, yeah,
tone of voice.
yeah.
But one of my pet peeves is those transactional emails that are, default sort of from the ecom platform, that are where you can exactly tell that's actually not part of the same team or part of the same platform that sends marketing emails, and it straight away takes you out of the experience and
Mhm.
the connection that you usually have with the brand. So
Mhm.
I do think while obviously everyone has those order confirmation, shipping confirmation, one thing that is really important is to make sure they're ideally coming out of the same platform, the same team has influence, is building them, or at least is guiding on what that email looks like and how it sounds.
Okay.
Um, and doesn't disrupt the user journey. So I think that's maybe on the transactional side of things. Um,
Mhm.
where that often also falls down, I think, is it's great when an order is placed, product goes out, it's shipped on time. But what
Mhm.
happens when there's a holdup in the warehouse or a holdup with your delivery partner, right? So if things go wrong, are you still communicating, hey, sorry, your order hasn't shipped yet, or your order's delayed, and this is the reason, and this is how we're planning to fix it.
Right.
So again, a
Right.
lot of the businesses I don't think put enough effort on what happens if things don't go the way they're supposed to.
Yeah, and I've just actually had a really interesting experience. Just recently, I ordered shirts. All right, two shirts off the internet, free shipping. The order was delayed by weeks, and I had to like literally contact support in order to
Yeah.
get updates. Right, and they never sent updates as part of the transactional um, queue. So yeah, you're right. So there's the transactional aspect, and then there's the post-purchase aspect. Let's dive a little bit more into the post-purchase. Let's assume that everything has been delivered, everything's, working, there's no returns or anything.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts behind what happens after the purchase? Most companies just tend to just keep sending marketing emails, right? And
It
I
keeps
think,
getting more, it just drops off a cliff, I think, in terms of automation often.
yeah,
And yes, they're still bombarded with marketing emails, even though I've just purchased, right? I still get a sale the next day. So I think there's an aspect of make sure you maybe exclude them from your marketing comms and then really
yeah,
focus on customer life cycle journeys or marketing automation journeys,
yeah,
because that's where you really build long-term brand loyalty that
mhm,
maybe is not as easy to measure, right? But
right.
there's so many studies we know, it's 5 to 7 times more expensive to acquire a new customer than retaining an existing one. We all know that. What I find quite interesting is the studies that look at the correlation between increase in retention rates
Mm-hmm.
and increase in profitability. So they show that, a really small increase in customer retention
Mm-hmm.
can lead to a big percentage increase, 25 to 90%, whatever, study you look at, of
Yeah.
wider profitability of the business. And that's because of course, people come back more often if they have a good experience with you throughout the
Mhm.
purchase and post purchase. They
Yeah.
spend more, but they're also likely to refer more friends. They're likely to talk positively about your brand. They're likely to reviews. That makes it easier for new
Mhm.
customers to find you and to make their purchase decision, drives
Mhm.
cost of acquisition down. So there's
Mhm.
so many pieces to how a post-purchase and good post-purchase experience impacts everything
Yeah.
that it's hard to connect the dots, but I think sometimes we just also need to trust in a bit more, I guess, the art of email marketing rather than
Yeah.
just focusing on the numbers.
And that's where I think brands need to, they invest a lot on the front end. And then on the back end, it's just sort of let's put them back into the marketing machine and keep sending them emails
Yeah.
or they put it in from a static recommendations of, well, hey, Sebastian, you bought this, maybe you should try this, right? There's the static recommendation emails that are post purchase, and then there's the automation that sort of looks at, like, really complex, like, because you bought this, you should buy this or the next, or there's surveys or there's reviews, like you said, right? And I think this is where, especially if you know your customer only buys X number of times per year, that you don't want to just keep going at them to buy more. What you want them to do, especially as they're experiencing that product that they purchased, to give them that opportunity to give you feedback, whether it's CSAT or whether it's people wanting to just give you feedback of how they are doing with the product. I think that's really, really important. Oftentimes, some brands miss it, right? Some brands miss it. What would you, if you, let's say you're dealing with a company that has limited budget or wants to involve themselves in post-purchase emails, what are some of the emails that you've seen work really well in your experience, and
Yeah.
what were the top ones that you would recommend?
Yeah. I would say exactly that. You mentioned the first examples you mentioned are conversion, right? We need to get this person to make another purchase. I would say take a second step back from trying to sell to the customer and
Mm-hmm.
ask, how can you make them feel good about their purchase? How can you thank them for their purchase?
Yeah.
So the way, the priorities I talk to for businesses is the first step, make sure you thank the customer. I have been
Mm-hmm.
in this industry for a while. I'd like to think
Yeah.
I'm not that old, but
Yeah.
turns out I've been doing this for a while, and I shop a lot online. And what really makes me so happy every time I receive it is just a thank you email. If I purchase from someone for the first time and they send me an email saying, "Hey, we appreciate you. Thank you for your first purchase with us. This is
Mm-hmm.
how it helps our brand,
Mm-hmm.
deliver on our mission. This is
Mm-hmm.
how it helps other people to find our brand." They can be personalized from the founders. Often
Yeah.
smaller brands do that very well, sort of gift sending services do that very well. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it can definitely be applied to larger businesses as well. And it's so easy to set up. It can be just a text, like even often the plain text emails for that work actually quite well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Again, downside, you can't track links or a direct conversion, but
Right.
I'm really convinced that that simple email, post first purchase, post second purchase, third, and maybe if someone places a 10th purchase, you can thank them and say, "You're a superstar. Here's a surprise and delight gift because you've just placed your 10th order with us."
There's so much what you just said, right? I mean, especially if you've got loyal people that want to keep coming back and 10th purchase, or, hey, I've seen it where that surprising later, like, hey, it's been 6 months since your last order, right? I mean, that's a post-purchase thing. Like, hey, it's your anniversary. I hope you're enjoying X product, right?
Yeah,
The founder email, I've seen those work really well, but then they skew it in a different angle. Sometimes they talk about some of the philanthropy that they're involved with, or the donations that they've made. I think there's this humanized connection, right? That we talk about leading up to that purchase, right? Talking about some of the things that brands do to help others, right? And that's important after the sale as well, to say, because you purchased from us, you helped put X or Y, and help other people. There's that humanized connection that you said builds that brand loyalty. Say, wow, I may have never known that, right? And when I hear about that, that sort of makes my heart feel warm, right? That I actually did this. And that's especially true for smaller businesses that are competing with these larger businesses. So think of it as sort of that extension, right? I call it the digital hug, right? Think of that digital hug or that purchase hug afterwards, and what can you tell about your story based off of that purchase? And it doesn't matter if it's the first purchase or the 10th purchase. People need to be reminded of that,
yeah,
and that can be involved in a post purchase. What do you think about surveys? Do you think people want to feel like they want to give feedback? And should that be in the first few emails? Is that too aggressive? Like, what are your thoughts about post
No,
purchase?
100%. So yeah, absolutely. This is again the first step I always explain is, build that connection,
Yeah.
focus on giving your customer sort of the warm and fuzzies. And
Hmm.
then the second piece I try to focus on is exactly what you said, is surveys. There's NPS survey, like you said, how likely are you to recommend a friend or
Hmm.
colleague to us? Rating 0 to 10, and then goes on to a form of, maybe what went well, what didn't go so well. If there was one
Hmm.
thing that we could do better, what is that?
Yeah.
It's every time I set it up, and sometimes I go through the responses because it's so interesting for
Yeah.
customers. I'm just surprised by the amount of people that are willing to give feedback, right? They're
Oh
just
yeah.
waiting to give feedback, whether that's positive or
Yeah.
negative, which is often obviously the most
Hmm.
useful. And
Hmm.
that's a really good area for an email marketing or a CRM team to actually be really useful for the wider business, pass that feedback on to
Hmm.
senior decision makers, to product teams to improve the website. So the learning there for me is really customers are so keen to give feedback, and it's a real treasure chest of information that you can get.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and you said for future automations as well, right? If you
Yeah.
track that NPS score as a contact field against
Hmm.
your contacts that have filled it out, you
Hmm.
can use that moving forward to segment your campaigns for promoters and detractors differently, or you can pass it on to the customer support team to say, can you reach out to this customer proactively because they're a detractor and try
Yeah.
to turn them around into a promoter, because those people are actually really likely to then stick around. If you manage to do that and turn a negative into a positive,
Yeah.
um, that's the goal.
I, I had a question asked to me at a conference one time when we were talking about post purchase emails, and the ask was, okay, so if I do all of these post purchase sorts of emails and transactions, do I hold them out from my regular marketing emails? Should I have a holdout group? Should I be sending both feel good post purchase emails, or should I also be sending them marketing emails? Like, I'm curious as to what you think about that.
Yeah, it depends, I think, the type of content that you're sending and how many emails you're sending as your regular marketing program. I'm
Mm-hmm.
working with clients that send an email or two per day, and it's mainly
Yeah.
promotions.
Yeah.
So that happens still, and it works for some.
Mhm.
I would say hold off on the, again, trying to sell, right? If that regular marketing email that you're sending is around content and
Uh-huh.
brand, and it's not actually selling something to the customer, I think you could, see a reason for sending both, but
Mhm.
definitely take them out of the sort of promotional activity while they go through the first step of the post-purchase
And
journeys.
some brands have deep recommendation engines, right? And they show on site like recommend product recommendations, and I've worked with recommendation engines inside of email. So I always say, don't be afraid to inject some recommendations, whether it's the static or the dynamic recommendation engines inside the email, but make it very subtle.
Yep.
Especially if you're trying to get them to take an action like give a review, take a survey, whatever that case may be, and that's where I think um, that opportunity in that window is very short, right? So um, there has to be some sort of data, right? Where it's mixed, where that order has been fulfilled and delivered, and then you start your sort of post purchase
Yeah.
um, process. Um, okay, so we got a couple minutes left. What I wanted to do was just kind of ask you, which is interesting. You know, people in Australia or in Asia Pac are much different than that of people here in the States. Do you think that this sort of applies to around the world? I'm just curious from a flavor that you've been down there for a long time, right? And I've been here in the States. I would have to say no. I would have to say it's the same all over the world. People want to feel good about the brands that they buy from, but I'm just love your opinion on it.
Yeah, 100%. And I worked in, originally from Germany, so worked in
Yeah.
Europe for a while, then moved to Hong Kong, spent some time there,
Yeah.
Australia. Consumer behavior doesn't really change.
Right.
I think, again, that, focusing on building that brand connection
Mhm.
is always important. I think in terms of how advanced brands are,
Yeah.
and the things that they do well and that they don't do so well.
Mhm.
There's definitely differences between,
Mhm.
different markets.
Yeah.
I think if you look at Australian emails, especially in e-commerce, I love like the intuitiveness of websites, the
Mhm.
design of websites. I think Australian businesses are doing that really well. Emails look usually beautiful. Marketing automation programs are quite strong.
Right.
So I definitely enjoy that about, Australian businesses, but on the other side, I also haven't been
Right. Right.
back to
Right.
Europe in a while or shopped in Europe in a while, but
Yeah.
um, love working with Australian businesses in that area.
So you think that, some people have this division of labor, right? When I say this, I mean like the email person, the email marketing manager, the director of email marketing typically owns a lot of the emails leading up to the purchase. And in some cases, they lead the transactional emails. And then oftentimes the post-purchase emails are done by loyalty teams, even in weird cases like by IT teams. You're thinking it should be in the email marketers team to own this because it's a part of, and they should work with loyalty if there is loyalty that's involved, right? I mean, I don't see it any other way.
Yeah,
Um,
100%. Nothing against IT departments and product departments.
right.
They're great at the reason because some of those emails are quite technical when you think of an order confirmation, right? There's a bit of like scripting involved and so on.
Sure.
It's what they're good at. So it goes sort of into the product management side of things or the tech side of things. But they're not often the people that have a good thinking around brand, around tone
Right.
of voice of the brand,
Right.
design of the email. So, it's good for it to sit in there, but there definitely needs to be input from other teams
Yeah.
and marketing teams to sort of bring those two things, the tech side of things and the
Yeah.
brand side of things together. And often that's where you, as a user, even, and you receive an email, really
Yeah.
see the differences.
All right. Key takeaways. What do you got? You got an audience in front of you. What are the things, a couple of things that people should know about? What do you think are the key takeaways for all this conversation?
I think the key takeaway for email marketing teams is really try and it's a fight. I've been fighting this fight for a lot of years to say we
Yeah.
need to focus on the emails that don't have an immediate focus on conversion and revenue. We need to see the wider picture of does that program drive long-term customer lifetime value and long-term brand loyalty?
Right.
And that is not easy to do because it's not easy to measure. But again, explain that again, we need to focus. We became so data obsessed, right? We became so obsessed with tracking revenue and seeing all the data and making all decisions based on data. And I think
Mhm.
there's value in a bit of balance to say, okay, we'll focus on, again, to stick with that saying on the art of email marketing rather than the science sometimes, and just trust in the power of emails to drive that brand loyalty long term.
That's awesome. My key takeaways are two. First of all, this is not about selling. You've done the job of selling and converting. This is a long tail play, right? For like what you said, the brand loyalty and things of that nature. This is where we spill over to a new area of analytics for the email program, right? Leading up to it, right? It's clicks, opens, click to opens, conversions, abandonment, site conversions, all that sort of stuff. Now we spill over into stuff like NPS, Net Promoter Score, CSAT surveys in and itself, right? Looking at different metrics to say, I was able to convert them, but now can I keep them? And how do I keep them? And telling the story. And now let me tell you, every brand has a story. You're competing with these large scale organizations, right? It sends out massive amounts of emails that everybody knows about. This is your chance as a brand. I'm talking to you, brand people. This is your chance as a brand to make a difference and show how different you are, whether you're a small or a medium sized business. And you can do that in the post purchase sort of flow. So look, like I say in every podcast, we're going to give Sebastian's details. where you can get more information on the House of Email. I am absolutely certain that he will more than happy to accept your connection and give you advice, or maybe just visit his site and learn from him. He's got a lot of experience. I wanted to thank you, Sebastian, for taking your time to be on this podcast. I want to thank everybody who continues to support Email Never Sleeps. And Sebastian, any final words from you before we sign off?
I
No.
love your key takeaways. Thank you, Andrew. It was fun to
You're,
be on.
dude, it was great to have you on. I appreciate it. Until next time, everybody, keep emailing, but really start thinking about what happens after that conversion. And thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time on Email Never Sleeps.